Hello, this is Rosie Snow, the Director of Christian Discipleship at Wesley Memorial United Methodist Church. And this is my digital Discipleship Dispatch. I am feeling pretty feisty this week, so buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy dispatch. All right, I will read to you what I have written for this week. With the onset of global pandemic, we are seeing the best of humanity. Health workers, community support volunteers, friends and neighbors. There are so many people whose first thought upon hearing about this impending crisis was, how do I serve others and keep them safe? Unfortunately, there are also some whose first thought was, how can I exploit this to increase profit and power for myself? People who immediately began to plot. How can we use this crisis to suppress the vote? How can we use this to force through pipelines? How can we use this to pollute and hurt people even more? And unfortunately, we are now starting to see the rotten fruit of that plotting. As state legislatures, such as Wisconsin, where the legislature majority is forcing or trying to force in-person voting during a pandemic for their own power gain. From Wisconsin to Ohio and Georgia, the fight against voter access is intensifying during a pandemic. As the Keystone Pipeline ramps up construction while protesters are forced to stay home because of the safety concerns. As Andrew Wheeler's EPA uses the crisis as an excuse to allow massive increases in pollution that hurts all of us. These are a few examples, and I don't mention them in order to cause even more anger or fear than we may already be dealing with. But we need to know that there are destructive forces in our world that will exploit this crisis in the most ugly and shocking ways imaginable. In HBO's Game of Thrones, the power-hungry Queen Cersei blows up a holy landmark full of people in order to win power. Her rival, whose family dies in the explosion, says that it was her own failure of imagination to imagine how ruthless the queen would be. It was that failure of imagination that left her unprepared. We must not fail to imagine how this crisis will be exploited, especially when we review some of the cruel abuses of power that we've lately seen so much of. We must not be unprepared. But how to prepare? What would Jesus do? Well, Jesus already did it. These forces that work to serve power and to harm, their demise was assured at the resurrection. Time is running out. Maybe that's why they've been acting so desperate lately. Can't hide the ugly. Just as we must not suffer a failure of imagination as to how destructive forces in our world will go, we also must not suffer a failure of imagination as to what Christ has made possible for us. When we see the heroism of health and emergency workers at this time, when we see communities coming together in mutual aid, that's more powerful. We must not suffer a lack of imagination in thinking there is any limit to that kind of power. It is time to rise up together, knowing that love wins. Because in God's love, We are more powerful than voter suppression. We are more powerful than pipeline companies. We are more powerful than corrupt politicians, even large groups of them working together. So I invite you, spend some time acknowledging what is coming, the ugliness that is coming. But then spend some time believing that love is more powerful, because it is.